and welcome back to Scarred for Life, the podcast where we open up old wounds by looking back at the films that scared us as kids. I'm Terry.
And I'm Mary Beth.
And each episode, our special guest brings with them a movie that traumatized them as a child.
This week, our guest is John R. Leonetti. He's a cinematographer and director who shot films like Piranha 3D, Dead Silence, and The Conjuring, as well as directed Annabelle, Wish Upon, and The Silence. His latest film, Lullaby, is hitting select theaters and on demand on December 16th. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me.
We're really excited to chat with you because, I mean, your Scarred for Life choice is always a good one to dig into. But I want to start with your career. When I was looking back at IMDb, and it's kind of funny because we're just now going through like a Chucky watch on a mini episode. Yeah. I saw that I think it's your first feature film as a cinematographer was Child's Play 3.
Actually, let me think about that. Maybe, but I want to say no.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember there was my first film as a cinematographer was a non-union biker picture in the South, in Biloxi, Mississippi. And the union came in about halfway through. And even though I contacted them, and they said it was okay to go and do it. And they took me off of it. We took, a lot of the people had to leave. Yeah. Or I would have been fined like $90,000. Anyway.
Holy cow.
That was I think called The Brotherhood or something. But I don't know, my first DP jobbing, if you will, was on Tales from the Crypt.
Okay.
And that's where I really, not only started as a DP. I was on the very first 3 episodes, the first trilogy. Walter Hill directed it, and that's when I started. I did like 2.5 seasons on and off. Maybe I don't know how many episodes I did. 7 or so. And I would do the wraparounds with Bones. I call him the Crypt Keeper.
Oh, that's so cool.
It was fun.
It seems like throughout your career, horror or genre pictures have been sort of like a theme. What made you want to be involved in films and especially like the horror genre?
It's actually a random thing. Okay. It's interesting. For example, shooting Child's Play 3, Chucky 3. That was just a job that was offered to me. Actually, after Tales from the Crypt, maybe they thought it was appropriate. And now that I kind of think about it, and that was just fun to do. It was fun on many levels, especially working with the puppeteers and Chuck.
Oh yeah.
Having 6 guys attached to this doll that you have to shoot. And working with them, rehearsing with them, lighting with them, it was really interesting. It was just a good learning curve for just something else as a facet of things we do in filmmaking. And it was cool. Just a little tidbit, real quick. It was so cool when Chucky would be his own stand-in, right? Because he didn't need one; he had to be hooked up to those cats anyway. And there was one time when I said Chucky, his head was looking like the opposite way or something. I said, Chucky, can you turn your head this way? And he goes like this, flips me off. I'll never forget that. They just were messing with me, and it was very cool. So that wasn't because I was a horror buff or fan necessarily at all. Okay. Yeah. I've shot, as you know, if you looked at my IMDb, many different kinds of things.
Oh yeah.
It's a wide variety, but really, what kicked it in, you guys, is I was a Universal boy, I call it. I was a cinematographer doing like The Scorpion King, for example. And I've done other movies at Universal. And James Wan was directing Dead Silence. Yeah. And they wanted to get a kind of an experienced but youngish DP to meet him and team up with him because he had only done Saw. It was a small independent film that, the studios want to protect their investment and all that BS, even though, James was very capable. Obviously, he's brilliant, And so that's how we met. And then we had such a great rapport. I did 4 more films in a row after that. I shot all those movies with him. And then I helped him create the Insidious franchise and did 1 and 2, and it was even a co-producer on it or whatever. And then we did The Conjuring, and it was that sort of progression with James, because he loved it, that got me into it. Now, I really love making horror movies because they're exceptionally fun to craft.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So every movie, if it's worth anything, you invest the audience in the characters, right? First.
Mhm.
Well, you got to do that in a horror movie too. That's
Absolutely.
essential.
Yeah.
And then once you do, then you can get under their skin, and then you can manipulate them. And that's the fun part. You get to use all these different tools. I mean, a lot of it is suspense, it's not, and that's so fun. And I always loved Hitchcock. He was like my mentor. Okay. So I studied him, and there was a book, Truffaut on Hitchcock. I randomly read, oh my God, 30 years ago. I have no idea how long ago it was. And Truffaut was a director himself, but he wrote on Hitchcock, and I analyzed what, Alfred Hitchcock did. You may or may not know this, but he literally had the whole movie shot and done and completed and edited in his mind before he started shooting.
Right.
Okay. And so I use that model, and that's exactly what I do the same. I have the whole movie is laid out. I write out the whole movie cut, not shooting, what do you call it? Like a shooting list for the day. It's literally like a storyboard without pictures. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And then once you have that and you're that prepared, then you can actually have a lot more freedom to be more creative if you want to know the truth. If you want to change something, you're going to change it. Anyway, but that's how I got into horror. And again, I'm not a buff. When I was a kid, which we'll talk about later, I did see The Exorcist. I was raised Catholic, scared the shit out of me. So I understand the effect it can have on an audience. And once I saw that, once we did Dead Silence, it scared people, but it didn't scare people like Insidious or The Conjuring, even though I think it's a good movie. Okay, it's a
I love
really
Dead
good
Silence.
movie.
Hey, it's what's funny, and I think one of the special things that sometimes happens with this podcast, and this is one of those cases, is we actually, one of our previous guests, Dead Silence, was their Scarred for Life story. It was the movie that terrified them.
Cool.
And so it's really kind of cool to like have the person that shot that movie, who is mostly responsible for like the terrifying nature of that film, terrifying your previous guest.
No, that's super cool. It is a scary movie. Please don't get me wrong. It's just, I think actually Dead Silence has legs that as it's come in time, and people appreciate it more and more, as it should be, because it's really I think a classy horror movie. And James obviously has so much to do with that. But it was fun to do. Oh my God, super fun.
Well, and I love the vibe that you curate in that too, with like the foggy, almost like hammery horror vibe. But also like, because you worked with James Wan, you have the cinematography that we are so used to in Insidious and The Conjuring. What was that like to develop that with him? I mean, it's iconic, iconic ways that you film ghosts and jump scares. It's so cool. So what was that like shaping that kind of aesthetic, both as yourself and also with Wan?
No, it's so true. Dead Silence was our meeting, our honeymoon, or, was the beginning of our relationship.
Yeah.
And that was a studio picture that was like a $20 million budget, I think it was. Okay. Now, when he did Saw, he did it for like $1 million. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
He had come from that world, and I had come from more studio pictures than independence, even though I had shot independence and television. I had done varied things, but what was interesting is we shot Dead Silence kind of like a normal movie in terms of schedule and this and that. And it was a little bit more grand Dead Silence, let's say.
Okay.
It was more stylized. It was, in terms visually stylized. It's scary and dark and very deep, skip bleach, very cool colors, blah, blah, blah. And working with James on that movie was just creating the color motif, going into the DI, the digital intermediate, and coloring the movie with him, and And knowing about that, he's a very visual guy. So we had this language that we kind of learned each other on in Dead Silence. Then here comes, well, we did another movie, Death Sentence, which is not a horror movie.
Right.
I don't know if
Yeah.
you guys ever saw.
I have,
think
yeah.
It's one of James's best movies ever, personally.
It's really good.
You know, it's really good. I think it has the resonance that is heart pounding, but there. Then the real next horror movie we did was Insidious 1. And I mean, we did that. I mean, I did it for nothing. I didn't even make a salary on it. And I got a back end ultimately and actually got paid some money for it, but the whole crew got a back end. We were all in this pool and that's like unheard of in the business. I mean, really unheard of it. That's a whole discussion in itself. But the point is, we probably prepped that movie for 6 weeks. You don't get 6 weeks prep on
That's
$1 million budget ever. If you get 2 weeks, you're lucky, right? So because we were doing it for free, it was more of an experiment. And we had these 2 homes and they were practical locations. And what James and I really came to terms with together, which we believed in Dead Silence, was that for Insidious, and we've come to really get to the point where every single, I believe, horror movie or scary movie needs to be as realistic as possible in terms of the way it looks, as natural to a degree. Don't get me wrong. You dramatize it by, strategizing the darkness in movies, but what was key is and the lighting has to be very real, organic, and like almost no movie lights.
Right.
In other words, like lit by practicals. And so that's one aspect. And I had time with my gaffer and my key grip and with James to design the lighting in the house for for 2 reasons, which are giant in making horror movies for those who are interested. One is, you want to take the audience with you throughout the place you're shooting, you're in the story, or it's a house, or what doesn't matter what it is. And you want to be able to move from room to room uninterrupted with sometimes long takes. But also, so you need to light the whole house.
Yeah.
You have to be able to shoot
it makes sense
everywhere all the time. In a regular movie, and even in Dead Silence, you go in and you shoot you shoot oftentimes a room out, and you go out of continuity, and then you shoot another room out, and then you shoot another room out, so that you can, it seems like most movies are made that way, you guys, that it's out of continuity. Well,
right.
For major reasons, aside from, well, it's better for the actors, it's better for the director, it's better for everybody, especially in a horror movie, because you see how the emotions and fear builds, and you already had the experience of what was before. So we set it up in Insidious 1 that we could do that. And every single movie after that, Insidious 1, 2, The Conjuring, Annabelle, all the movies I've directed basically since then, pretty much have been shot in continuity.
Wow. That's unheard of a lot, typically, isn't it?
Exactly. Well, it is. But it's so smart. It's actually efficient. It's even more efficient because, it's better to take a lot of time up front and prepare everything and then just go and don't get interrupted. And to have the freedom to go from room to room is giant. I'm telling you, it's giant on every level. So Insidious 1 was like the little baby that we developed for The Conjuring.
Yeah. Wow.
And in The Conjuring, we built that farmhouse on stage, 6,000 square feet, never, ever moved a wall. We made it just a little bit bigger. And we used a practical location in North Carolina, outside of Wilmington. There was a farmhouse. And in the beginning of that movie, I don't know if you remember, but they pull up, we're inside the living room, they come in the front door, all that. And then when they come in, we bring them in, we go through the front door, all the way through the house and go out to the backyard, all in one shot. Well, it was really
It's a
three
great
shots.
shot.
But because we used the practical location on the beginning and the end, and with green screens, we combined the front and back door, and then we went through the house on stage, but it's seamlessly all one shot. But point is, though, we made it practical on stage, okay? Just like a practical home. And we lit it with the same techniques that we use in Insidious, yet we're on stage. So I had stage lighting all the way around it. We had a cyc that went 270 degrees of trans light that we shot stills of all the way around at the real place. And then we put the trans light all the way around, the set, and we treated it like a practical location.
That's amazing.
Wow.
And I'm telling you, it adds to how scary these movies are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
So that's a bit to chew on. I know it's just, it really is cool. And if I thought about teaching, maybe going to, teach film school or something. I've lectured a little bit before, but, these are things that would be, I think, super instrumental for film students,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I would kind of be remiss. You mentioned TV, and when I was looking through your career, there is a little known show that I saw pop up there that you directed, I think, one episode of, but Kindred the Embraced from the 90s. Do you even remember that? It was a vampire TV show. I think it was on broadcast. And it was a show it was based on World of Darkness and Vampire the Masquerade role-playing game. And
I remember it. But vaguely, but yes. Oh my God.
I was a huge nerd, and I remember watching that show religiously when it came out. I think it only had maybe a single season run. But I saw that you directed episode. I was like, holy cow, what a small world, because I loved that show as a kid.
That was cool. God, you really rung a bell for me there. I mean, you shook me up a little bit. That's so true. Yeah, I did some television here and there. I directed one episode of A Sleepy Hollow.
Yep, I saw that too. Yeah,
got that. I'm trying to think. I don't know if I ever did anything in the sort of horror zone in television, to my recollection, though. But I'd love to direct television again. Yeah,
it's in a renaissance right now.
Horror would be fun.
Yeah. Okay, so speaking of directing, you have a new film coming out called Lullaby. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about that film?
Surely. It's it's a different twist, I think, on telling a supernatural horror story. And it's very cool. In contrast to The Exorcist, for example, which is based on, Judeo-Christian mythology. This is based on ancient Hebrew mythology, which comes way before Christ. Mm-hmm. And I think, and it's all about Lilith, who is Lilith? Well, I didn't know until I read the damn script, and I went, oh my God, this is cool. And I researched this entity, this lady, and you come to find out she was the first wife of Adam before Eve. And this is in the Talmud, not the Torah, but it's in the Talmud. In their mythology, mm-hmm. She was equal to Adam, not of his rib, and different than Eve, of course. Mm-hmm. And she was a strong woman. Mm-hmm. And she was the first woman, supposedly, but she was such a strong woman, she was banned to the wolves because she was too strong for God and I guess Adam. I don't know. It's a bizarre thing. So she's kind of the first woman's liver, really. You want to know. But beyond that, I really love female protagonists. And mm-hmm. If you look at a lot of my films have been that, right, about them. And she really interested me. But basically what happened is, because she was banned to the wolves, she could not have natural babies, human babies. So any offspring she had were half animal, half her, whatever. They were freakish little thingies. And, she was pissed. And so, she took this song that Adam used to sing to her and turned it into a lullaby. Now, let's pause with that for a second, because lullabies are all creepy. If you stop and think about lullabies, they're all creepy. And so when I read the script, I closed the, read the last page and closed it. And I went, how cool would it be to make a title sequence up front that shows how creepy, our contemporary lullabies are, and then set the stage for, the terror and the horror of what, is in a lullaby, really.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting to me. So if you notice in the movie, it's intertwined when meeting Vivian and her husband in the opening of the movie.
Yes, it is.
And it's
Yeah.
super fun to do, but neither here nor there. So Lilith has created this lullaby that if a mother sings the lullaby and she has a newborn baby, it opens a portal for her harbingers, her crone, which is a wicked witch, like kind of character, and the other harbingers are her couple of her offspring that are freaky, half baby, half toddler, half animal configurations, which come and set the stage for Lilith to literally come through the portal and take the baby once the lullaby has been sung and three sort of things have kind of happened.
Mm-hmm.
And that's basically what it is. And this has been going on since the beginning of time. Mm. And in the 13th century, this lullaby book surfaced in the world. Now, before that, from what we understand or the way we look at it is, the lullaby was just passed on through lore, through, sort of word of mouth and word of song, if you will. And it's about a couple that gets a new baby. They get the book, as lullaby book, and she sings the song, and here we go.
Here we go. That's cool. So it's interesting you brought up this angle as well. Like a lot of possession movies or like demonic movies or that kind of supernatural stuff is based a lot in this sort of Judeo-Christian, as you mentioned, yes. A lot of Catholicism. But yes. Like recently we've seen a lot more entries in like it was the Vigil, which was Jewish horror, and we've seen like the Wailing, which was Korean, and there's like a lot of different.
No, you're right.
There's a lot more representation, I would say. And so I was curious, what about this particular story drew you as a director?
Well, part of it was Lilith. Mm-hmm. She to me is just super interesting. And again, I'm kind of a pro-woman kind of guy, and I love the sort of paradox of the theme of this story. There's nothing more powerful than the love you have for your child. And that power, or if that's taken away, what creates is the opposite of that, a retribution that is horrific. Mm. And so it's kind of a two-edged sword that love can create, this kind of pain and retribution. And it's interesting. That was really interesting to me. I also was intrigued by the way that they open a portal and how it comes through a mirror. And we can talk about how we did some of that. And it goes back to, I immediately saw that, I'm not a big visual effects in horror movie person. I'm not a big visual effects are great. Don't get me wrong. It's when they're seamless, you don't know they're visual effects. They're phenomenal. And it's not that I really don't like them, but I don't want that evident in a horror movie where I think it has to be very grounded and real.
Right.
So I had a lot of experience with ghost glass, it's called, which are beam splitter mirrors.
Okay.
And so when I saw that, I go, oh my God, how cool will it be to do that in camera? Which we did. We built black rooms behind the fireplace and the mantle where the mirror was, and in the hallway. Right. And would put the crone or whatever out there, and with light in this beam splitter that is partially translucent, partially reflective, like a mirror, but you can see through it too. Like in the detective or in those rooms in the the
interrogation room type stuff.
Interrogation rooms. That's a beam splitter basically. Okay, a version of that. So. And it immediately struck a chord in me, because if you can do it in camera and the actors can react to it, they can act to it, that it actually adds to the realism. And again, I firmly believe this. The more real it is, the more believable it is. The more believable it is, then the scarier it will be.
It's such a cool shot that I love seeing that. So I'm really glad that you were talking about it, because I was like, I was curious how you pulled that off, because it's almost like at one moment when you first introduce it, it's almost imperceptible, and then you start to see like the features form in it, and it was like it's really cool.
It's all done with light and balancing light. The black room in behind and the reflecting the set and the actors off the mirror. And then, my corporation, if you will, my personal business corporation, when I incorporated in 2001, it's called, I named it Balancio, balance in light and in life is my motto. Everything should be in balance. But so that struck a chord with me. Okay. And, to create a lullaby, I thought would be really interesting, literally to come up with a song. And immediately I called Joe Bishara, who was the composer on, Conjuring, Annabelle, Insidious. Yeah. He was the demon in Annabelle and in Insidious and in The Conjuring, And
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he's a friend too, and to be able to work with him and to, I really researched the lullaby myself. I looked at ancient Hebrew or Jewish lullabies, and then I never found one of those that just was just right, because it has to be beautiful and enticing yet creepy.
Right.
And so I ultimately found an ancient or old Gaelic tune lullaby that had the right chords, simple chords that will also grab you, and it's repeatable. Like you know what I mean? And,
yes.
And I sent that to Joe, and then we ended up with what we got.
That's so cool.
Wow,
it was fun. Cool. So it was a lot of challenges, but it was just a really interesting story, and I love the whole thing the relationship between John and Rachel. And
yes, it's like it's one of the few movies I feel like that doesn't have the wife being crazy or the mom being crazy, and they're on the same page.
You're right.
And I think that's so incredible to see in horror. Okay, cool. We're not reverting to a crazy woman, a crazy mom, and the guy is put her away. It's just, it's a nice, that was refreshing.
Even in Annabelle. You're right. Annabelle, he didn't believe her. Her husband didn't believe her, really. And she was going through this pretty much by herself, where, like they say, we a team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I love that. I mean, I'm a sap. So I love that saying, just saying. I mean, I make horror movies, but I'm actually a fairly sweet person,
I completely find that. I feel like the nicest people are the ones that make horror movies. It's what we have discovered during the podcast. Cool. And real quick, what was it like working so much with the baby? Because obviously there's a baby in the whole movie. What was that like?
This one was a toughie. I mean, it was great, but oh my God. We had babies in Annabelle as well, and about the same age. And oh my God. You always have, of course, you have to have twins, so that you can, because of scheduling, you just can't rely on one baby to pull things off, because they for obvious reasons. So we had two sets of twins in this one for Eli, one for Zach. Okay. And so this was, I love babies, okay, and I love having them around, but how do you make a baby cry? And I mean, you go to jail for that shit, right? So we would bring a baby in when it was tired, it was already crying, and we'd wait for the right, or and then you could bring a baby in when you hope it's in a good mood, and then it starts crying. Would have, basically baby time, we called it. We would have, we'd have that nursery ready and lit. We had the whole house lit, like I told you before. The whole thing was ready to go. But we would even I put the B camera in there, ready to go. Oh, the baby's asleep, or whatever it is. Bring it in. We'd stop what we were doing, run down to that set. It's a little crazy. And the poor parents, their schedules got all fucked up. Of course, the kids, and they didn't, careful what you wish for and what they signed up for. Oh my God. I mean, at the end of the day, they were fine, but it was hard on them. And it's not easy. I'm not going to bullshit you.
Yeah.
I can imagine.
Seriously. But okay. So you talked a little bit about your relationship to horror when you were younger, but I wanted to dive a little bit more into that. Do you remember the first horror movie you ever saw?
It's a really good question. I have to say, I want to say it was The Birds
Okay.
Oh, okay.
or Psycho. That's when I got cooked into Hitchcock. Those two movies stuck out to me. My father worked on The Birds. He was in a gaffer and electrician. My dad worked on The Wizard of Oz. He was an electrician.
Wow.
That's a whole other.
Whoa!
That's a whole other discussion. My father and the heritage of that. But anyway, yeah. So I want to say those. Because I'm a lot older than you guys, and in those days, unless you were into horror, the more obscure, cool horror classic things I really wasn't into. Of course, then came along The Exorcist, which was very popular. It's very commercial, yet it was extremely frightening.
Yeah.
So that was kind of I guess, what I would remember.
Okay. Well, so Terry, do we want to maybe transition into talking about The Exorcist?
Yeah, let's do that. But first, let's take a quick break, and we're back.
And we're back. Okay. Well, John, what movie did you bring with you today for us to discuss?
Well, I brought The Exorcist, the original.
The Exorcist. So, listeners, you know that we have chatted about The Exorcist previously, but just a quick catch up. In The Exorcist, when a teenage girl is possessed by a mysterious entity, her mother seeks the help of two priests to save her daughter.
Yes. Okay. Right. So, give us kind of your horror story for this. How old were you when you saw this? How did you see this? Why did you see this? Why is this your Scarred for Life pick? Give us basically your horror story.
I think it was in 73 the movie came out, maybe.
Yeah.
Something like that. Yep. I was 17.
Okay.
Now, I was also raised Catholic. Okay. And I was very, very, in those days, devout. Very. I was the lead altar boy at all the way through grade school.
Oh, wow.
I was the one that went, was pulled out of class to go serve all the funerals with the bishop, and I did all the weddings, and I can go on and on about that.
Did you go to Catholic school?
I did. I went to St. Timothy's and then to Loyola High School.
Oh, okay.
Which we can talk a little bit about later, because there is definitely an Exorcist story for Loyola High, which I'll tell you. That's kind of interesting in any case. But so I just remember going to the movies with friends, and then I was so scared. I came back and I asked my parents literally, can I sleep on the floor in front of in your bedroom?
Oh, no.
And I did.
Oh.
So, and again, I wasn't like a horror movie, aficionado or buff, but it affected me. And again, it's because I really believe because I was so, I had so much faith, and belief and all that. Now, today, I'm not as religious, to be candid. Okay. And I'm not knocking it if you are or you aren't. I'm just being, but then my perspective is very different than it is now.
Wow. So you saw it in the theaters. What was that experience like to see this in a movie theater, like when it is, just come out recently?
Oh, well, from what I remember, I just remember it, it wasn't a jump scare movie. It was just, it wasn't like that. It was just relentless terror with what happened with, first the little, her, the girl, and then Reagan was her name, I think.
Yeah.
And the two priests, I think it was Ferris and Marin, I believe, were the priests. The young one was Ferris, and then Marin was one as well, and that's the one they ultimately called in. And I don't know. I just think it was how she was so manipulated by this spirit, just totally grabbed me, and like, it's almost like I thought it was real. They pulled it off, and so that could her head really spin around, keep spinning around. it was kind of believable. It sucked me into like, you know, really being, again, because of my faith, it gave a lot of sort of power to the devil.
Yeah.
And so that was conjured in my mind. And yeah, I mean, it scared me and all my friends. And I wasn't the only one that slept with our parents that night, I want to say. So,
Oh my God.
I believe it.
you know, it's just the faith of it, though.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh yeah.
So you were in Catholic school. Did other Catholic students go see this movie too, or
Yeah,
at your school?
yes, it was my high school buddies from Loyola is who I went with, basically. And
Okay.
one of them, Cameron, who then ultimately became a Jesuit priest, ultimately.
No way.
Totally. And these were Jesuit priests in the Exorcist. Yeah, we were being taught by the Jesuits.
Yeah.
Loyola is a Jesuit school, so I forgot. That adds to the whole party of this thing, you know? So, yeah. And, you know, I think that, you know, if I look at the movie today, looking back at it, it holds up, but it isn't near as effective when I see it now as when I saw it then.
I was wondering about that because you know, this has never been really a movie that like I appreciate the filmmaking behind it. I appreciate what it's doing, but like I was never raised religious. I'm not a religious person.
Right.
And so when I finally saw this movie that everyone had been talking about, when I don't think I saw it until I was maybe like in my late teens, maybe early 20, I think late teens probably. But it didn't really hold the same effect on me that everyone seemed to have. And I do wonder if that's because I was never raised religious. The stuff in here was like more of just special effects and you know, goopy vomit and stuff. So like I never really had like a connection to this film that a lot of people do.
I did.
Like very bad.
I was also raised Catholic, and I have, and my family is still very Catholic. On one side, Irish Catholic.
Yeah.
I
Mary
have no
Beth. That's Mary Beth. Go ahead.
Mickey Andrews, like,
oh my God, yeah.
yeah. But my dad is like very scared of demons, and that's a whole thing. But watching it with him when I was younger, like I 100% was like, now that we've said Pazuzu a million times, I'm cursed. Like it's coming for me. And like we're married now. Actually, my husband, I just showed it to him for the first time this year, and he was like, I get why people were scared of it, but he wasn't raised Catholic either. So it is really interesting to watch it with people who weren't raised specifically Catholic and have that very specific kind of like relationship / trauma, I'll call it that, to the subject matter.
Well, it's true, but you know what's interesting? If we analyze The Exorcist and The Conjuring, I believe The Conjuring 20 years from now will hold up better than The Exorcist did 20 years later.
100%.
And I'm nothing against the filmmakers of The Exorcist, because they're the best ever. I mean, oh my God, Owen Roizman, who even shot it, you know, oh my God, come on. I mean, the photography, forget, you know, everything. I mean, it was well made and crafted.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
Effective. I'm not dissing it, but it would be interesting to analyze, because it's the same subject matter, really. I mean, it's an exorcism deal, you know, and it ultimately, but I think part of it is, of course, the way we did it. I think obviously part of that is the story and the fact that the Warrens have some reality base to them, and that, you know, people have that you can make there's accounts of that. But I'd really be curious to see in 20 years, because I think The Conjuring, honestly, and not because I had anything to do with it, is one of the best horror movies in the past couple decades.
I completely agree with that.
Yeah.
And I honestly believe that it will hold up a lot more than The Exorcist, because I don't know. I love The Exorcist. I really do. It's just, it doesn't really have that same draw to me that like seeing The Conjuring has. And yeah, The Conjuring is more recent, yada, yada, yada. But like, I really do think that movie is going to stand the test of time a bit more than The Exorcist will. And I think part of maybe for me is because I probably saw The Exorcist for the first time around the same time that Scary Movie 2 came out. And there's that opening of Scary Movie 2.
Oh, that's funny.
Is like, you know,
that's funny.
it's a complete parody of
It
basically
is.
all of the scary parts of, or like the more abject horror parts of
It's really funny.
The Exorcist. And so like now watching it, I just want to quote the Scary Movie 2 movie when I watch it. And so it's in my mind, it's like this almost ruined magical moment for me just because of when I saw it, probably.
Wow.
That's very funny. That's
Wow.
very funny. But I do have a little story I have to share with you.
Okay.
So, we get scared by The Exorcist. I'm in Loyola High, Jesuit school.
Yes.
The main building for California, and that's not like Europe or whatever, but it's 100 years old, right, at the time. It was built in the 1880s.
Okay.
And it was a 3-story. We had 3 stories, and then there was an attic above it.
Okay.
And I was
Oh,
a
wow.
senior in
Okay.
high school at the time. So we for our senior prank, I randomly, my father and our family had a motion picture equipment business rental company, and we were moving from one place down the street to another building. So the intercom system that was there was left behind.
Oh boy.
So I got this crazy idea, and we, with the help of one of the Jesuit scholastics, over a couple weekends with my buddies, he gave us a key at night. We snuck in and we went into the attic and we wired all the rooms in the 3rd floor to this intercom system where you'd have to enter it in this one room. You pull down a ladder, you go up, you pull it up, nobody knows you're there or whatever. And so for about 2 weeks, we would go up there, we'd call kids out of class, like we were the dean and shit, we just messed with it. But Father Colosimo, who taught world religions and calculus, he was a pretty old guy at the time. He was super serious. And so I would go up there and I'd get on the rafters in there and I'd go I swear to God, and I'd do that a little bit and then I'd stop. And I swear to God, and it was freaking them out and they're wondering, who's doing this? Where's this coming from? Is it in the wire? Whatever. I swear to God. And then we finally got caught. One little freshman kid at lunch one day saw us going up there and we got busted. And then we had to clean out all the lockers in the whole school. But anyway, I had to share that with you.
That's
the
so
little
amazing.
Exorcist Jesuit thing.
That's so amazing.
Was that after you saw The Exorcist or before?
After.
Oh my
That's so
God.
amazing.
That is incredible.
Yeah, because I knew the Marin thing. I turned this frightening thing into kind of a bit of a fun, jokey thing.
Oh my God. Well, okay. So after, even before you saw it, was there buzz around school about The Exorcist? Were people talking about it at all?
I want to say yes in a way, but it's been so long, honey. I mean, it's been a long time. That's 50 years ago for me.
Fair enough.
So old, twice older than you are. No, but you know what I mean? It's a long time ago.
Yeah.
But because I was in a Jesuit high school.
Yeah.
I mean, that was we got to go see The Exorcist.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And and my Cameron, the guy who became a priest, ultimately a Jesuit priest, he was converted from being a Baptist Catholicism, and he came into my school in 6th grade at St. Tim's, and that's where we became friends. We both went to Loyola together, and we're still friends to this day, by the way. But wow. He was he could read tarot cards and stuff. He was really into the whole thing. Probably shouldn't tell you this, but there were some nights where even the Jesuits in those days would go into this room, and Cameron would go in there, and they would speak in tongues.
Oh wow, okay.
With the Holy Spirit, that kind of shit.
Whoa.
And I didn't have any part of it, but I'm just telling you, there's a little bit of history there tied to The Exorcist in that way, and it's just kind of interesting.
Wow. Catholicism is so weird.
That's for
Good
sure.
Lord.
I'm just so curious about your experience watching this film, because as you grow up, there are movies where it's very indelible for theatrical experience, like that first time, or being able to see a movie without any buzz. Like for me, I remember going in high school, like because I was in high school in the 90s, so it was Scream and Titanic. Like you come back from those movies, everyone at school is talking about it. So I'm curious. I'm so excited to hear you talk about sort of like seeing that for the first time, where no one was really expecting. Like now, it's The Exorcist, but at the time it was like a cultural phenomenon.
Yeah, it was. Well, I think the thing made how many hundreds of millions of dollars
Yeah,
in those
so
days?
much.
That's giant.
Yeah.
Giant. The exposure it got, not just in the US and Canada, but internationally too.
Yeah.
But that's also when the world was more religious, period.
Mhm.
And I think people were way more susceptible to, again, I really think a lot of it had to do with faith and the fact that I was Catholic
Yeah.
and, I was surrounded by, I was just way into it. Yes, there was a buzz about it. And then, but I don't know. It's the one movie that as I go back in my lifetime when I was, like that young, that, just immediately just stands out as what, like, it just scared the heck out of me,
Yeah.
it really
Yeah.
did. And it just made that impact on me,
Yeah. So,
Did it-
so go ahead.
No, I was going to say, did this, it terrify you? Did it spark any interest in watching like horror movies or experiencing them at all? Or did it kind of keep you from ever wanting to watch horror movies again?
No, I think it opened my mind to them,
Okay.
actually. And like I say, I liked Hitchcock's movies before that, and they're, psychological horror.
Oh yeah. The Birds is terrifying. The Birds scared me when I saw it in grad school. Like it's still
Oh my God.
scary.
Bird still holds up in its own way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just, ironically so, which is, it isn't, it really isn't a horror movie, but it's so well made. The Wizard of Oz. It's,
Oh yeah.
That was a
Totally.
Scarred for Life pick on this movie as well for someone, for one of our previous guests, was The Wizard of Oz. So absolutely.
oh yeah, I even thought about that again, since my dad worked on it. That's just a whole other, thing. But I think that's one of maybe the best movie of all time because and how well it does hold up. More so, no offense, I think, than The Exorcist when I go back and look at it.
I agree.
And then, I'm going to go forward a little bit and connect another movie, but it's Poltergeist.
Yep.
Okay. Now, I worked on the original Poltergeist as well. I was the focus puller, the lead assistant. I'm the one that did the zoom in the hallway where it expanded and contracted
No.
when Beth Williams is running down the hallway. Yeah. My brother, Matt, who's a cinematographer as well, he's retired now, shot it. I was the focus puller. We even used our own family camera on the thing. I go on and on, but
shit.
I have that experience, and I had the experience of, we're veering a little bit, but I had the experience of watching Toby Hooper was the director, but Steven Spielberg had a lot to do with it too. And I love Toby. Oh man, I love that guy. But that's just a thing. That's a whole other conversation. But now working on that movie while working on it, it did creep me out a bit.
Really?
Like being in the pool with all those skulls and all that stuff popping up. But I think the original Poltergeist and The Exorcist are kind of in the same vein for me of effects and, kind of, I don't know, believability, suspension of believability enough to believe that it's really happening kind of deal.
Yeah.
But anyway, I veered, but
Well, no, what's funny though is that you bring this up, and when we started Scarred for Life, there was a movie that scarred me, and there was a movie that scarred Mary Beth, and Poltergeist was Mary Beth's choice. That was the movie that scarred her for life.
That movie ruined me as a child. I still get scared around closets because I am a grown adult.
Well, I could understand it. Oh my God, just that closet in Poltergeist. Oh, I could tell you how that was done, and it would blow your mind, like, all the rays of light and stuff coming out of it. It was, do you know that we took we stripped a mattress bed spring and broke up mirrors and put mirrors on all those bed springs, and then attached vibrator motors to the bed spring, and then filled it with smoke and hit at least two different, from two angles, xenon lights into it and reflected it out. And that's what made those shards in camera.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
Oh, I've got so many stories about how we do shit, but that's just a little tidbit. Yeah.
That's so cool.
Isn't that cool?
That's amazing.
Oh,
yeah, it's fun. Yeah, it was fun to watch
movies.
That. I was just the assistant cameraman, but still, it was a hell of an experience. But The Exorcist is, I don't know, still, even though it doesn't hold up for me, if I go back in my mind, it still frightens me. I remember being that scared that I'd sleep, on the floor in my parents' room. My God.
Yeah. Did your parents know you saw it? Like, were they like, or did you sneak it and then were like, I saw The Exorcist?
No. They knew we were going, but they were kind of blown away when I said, would you guys mind if I sleep on the floor with you guys tonight? And they go, sure, John. Oh, sure, John Robert. That was my, they call me John Robert, whatever. Anyway. And I mean, crazy.
Well, what I will say is that what I think has held up, and I rewatched it in prep for our recording tonight, was the first part of it where we don't know what's wrong with Regan, and her mom is taking her to all these specialists, and everyone's running all these tests, and the movie does a really good job of focusing on that scientific aspect, where like there's that scene where they are trying to take a sample from her neck and it's just like spurting blood, and there's like all of these little moments where no one knows what's wrong with this poor girl. And it hit me particularly as an adult, because one of my friends is going through a similar thing where like she's like having pains and she's going to all these meetings and all these doctors, and no one is able to like, well, let's pass you off to this other doctor and pass you off to this other doctor and find out what's wrong. Very and so true. That aspect of it, I think in particular, that first half, I think is still incredibly effective, because it's that fear that I think everyone has over a loved one, where you don't know what you can do to fix them. You're at your wit's end and nothing seems to be helping.
I think that's absolutely accurate, especially now that you say that. It's so true. The build up to it all, until when the mother finally goes in the room and all shit hits the fan, and it's cold and she's spinning her head around and all that bullshit. You're right. It actually laid a lot of groundwork for psychological groundwork, for the vivid sort of horror that came later. And, when I did Annabelle, there's a scene where the priest in Annabelle takes the doll and away from them and goes, and takes it back to the church. And as he's leaving, I did an homage to The Exorcist, when it's Father Mirren, when there's that shot where he's walking, in front of it, just classic, if you remember that.
Yep.
Oh yeah. And
I actually really set that up to like mimic or, give an homage to that. I think it was an effective shot. It was creepy as hell. But so that was my own little, way to contribute back to it, I guess.
And I talk about this a lot, but I live right outside of Washington, D.C., so I live near the Exorcist steps. And it always is like my fun little tidbit. And my favorite is seeing people do CrossFit and like running up and down the steps, like because people will just work out there, because it's like right near the university. It's in a busy part of town.
I've been there.
Yeah. And it's really funny. It's by a gas station now. Like, it's very unassuming. Like, it just looks like a weird set of stairs. Like, you wouldn't guess. But it's my favorite little tidbit about where I live is the Exorcist steps are right there.
Well, it's cool. And the way that was, the way that was like shot and set up. And I mean, I don't know, Friedkin and Roisman together, what a team in that respect. It was visually. Yeah. I mean, Owen Roisman is he's definitely one of the best cinematographers of all time.
Yeah.
And, he knew when they kept it very real, was very, the lighting in that movie is some of the best in any movie ever.
It really is.
I really, will say that. Yet, they'd stylize it and get the smoke going and the rays of light and all that shit going when it was appropriate. And I really have to take my hat off to them for that, because they were, as a cinematographer, ultimate respect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we are approaching our time. Do we want to wrap up and give The Exorcist our rating out of 5?
Sounds good.
All right, Terry, you are up first. How many head spins out of 5 do you give The Exorcist?
So I mentioned this movie doesn't resonate with me as much as it does with other people. However, I will say that watching it in prep, I appreciated a whole lot more than I ever probably did as a teen or growing up, because I think that first half is just such an immaculate job of well, even you, John, had said earlier about the importance of creating characters that you care about and creating that sort of situation and psychologicalness before you start to throw the kitchen sink or pea soup at them. And so I think that this movie does a fantastic job of doing that. I also, for the first time, and again, I've not seen this movie a whole lot, but I will say that this was the first time that I realized that maybe Father Karras is gay, and there's like a queer edge to that I think is more pronounced in the book. And so like that kind of intrigued me. I think this movie is phenomenally shot. It's just, I happen to have seen it around the same time that I saw Scary Movie 2. And so all of the horror parts don't really land as much for me anymore as they probably had before. But I still think this is a monumental work of filmmaking, and so I'm going to give it 4 head spins out of 5. What about you, Mary Beth?
I give it 4.5. This is an all-timer for me as an ex-Catholic. It terrified me as a kid. But again, as I've watched this, as I've gotten older, I've focused more on what's scary in terms of like the emotional journey, like you're mentioning this, Tara, that they go on between Karras and him grieving his mother and his guilt about his mother, to Reagan both going through all this medical trauma, but also like trying to cope with her dad not being around and having an imaginary friend to kind of deal with that, and having a mom who is, trying to be there, but is a working actress. And, there's a lot of really interesting stuff going on that I didn't catch watching it when I was younger. And the more I've seen this, the more I've been more psychologically upset by this movie, not due to the religious aspect, but just to like how well it melds these characters' inner turmoils and problems and traumas into this really terrifying culmination of a religious horror movie. And I just think it's an incredible, for me, it didn't age as well, but it still stands up. So it's a 4.5 for me. But John, you have the final word. How many head spins out of 5 do you give The Exorcist?
Well, okay. For initial impact, I have to say it's 5.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. For me at the time, I don't know, 50 years ago almost. That's really crazy to say. But, if I was looking at it today, I think I'd be in the 4 zone. 4, maybe 4.5, I guess. It's really good, but so I have a different perspective now than I did then. But when back then, for me, it was a 5.
Yeah. Understandable.
Cool.
Well, thank you so much, John, for joining us. The floor is yours. What do you have that you want to talk about, promote? And are you on social media? Can people find you anywhere?
I'm not. I'm the weirdest. I was on Facebook the first probably day or two it existed. And then I went, I don't think I have time for this. I don't think I'd be honorable enough to do a good job on Facebook. That's why I stopped.
Yeah.
Now, that being said, I will let you know I am involved in a movie now that I believe is going to get going, and it's called The Angler.
Okay.
And the script is done, and we're talking about casting literally today, and maybe we can get a few reads from some wonderful actors over the holidays to get that going. It is really interesting psychological thriller with it's left up to the audience if it's supernatural or not, and it's all about guilt. What and guilt can conjure in your mind, and how it can create even visions, and whether that's in your mind or is it supernatural is kind of the thread through this thing. And it's dark, and it's pretty good. So
Oh yeah.
Awesome.
anyway,
Cool. And then also, everybody, Lullaby is going to be in theaters and on demand on December 16th. So please check that out as well. But listeners, you've heard from us. We want to hear from you. What was your experience with The Exorcist? You can send us an email at scarredforlifepodcast@gmail.com, or you can reach out to us directly on Twitter. I am at MB McAndrews.
And I'm a Gaily Dreadful.
And of course, don't forget to follow the podcast on Twitter at Scarred Podcast.
And please don't forget to review, rate, and subscribe. And if you want to help support us, join us on Patreon.
Thank you to Eric Power for our artwork. Thank you to Sean Keller for our music. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Please stay safe out there, but most importantly, stay creepy.
And until next time.